Hour 0. The Situation Room under the White House is lit only by the cold glow of screens. Red warning banners flash across NORAD and CENTCOM feeds. A voice breaks through the static. Mr. President, multiple launches detected. Origin, Central Iran. Confirmed Qassem Basir hypersonic systems 10+. For a split second, the room goes silent except for the hum of servers. Then the chaos begins. Advisors scramble. Maps of the Persian Gulf lighting up with trajectory lines converging on U.S. bases in Bahrain, Qatar, and the UAE. These missiles are not tests. They are fully armed warheads moving at Mach 5, programmed to destroy hardened aircraft shelters, fuel depots, and communications nodes in seconds. President Hayes grips the edge of the polished table. "Are we sure it's Iran?" he asks. The answer comes cold and precise. "No doubt, sir. They've unleashed their strategic arsenal." This is the nightmare scenario that Pentagon wargamers have whispered about for years. Iran deciding to use its full missile inventory, drone swarms, and proxy forces in one synchronized surprise strike. The question no one has ever answered clearly is whispered now by the National Security Advisor. Can we actually lose this one? In this video, we explore the hour-by-hour unfolding of Iran's most powerful cards first, how its ballistic missiles, long-range drones, mines, and cyber attacks collide with America's forward forces and global commitments. Is the U.S. military prepared for such a multi-layered attack, or can Iran deliver enough blows to shift the balance of power, even temporarily? This isn't science fiction. It's based on real weapons, real strategies, and real vulnerabilities. Stay with me until the end, and subscribe for tactical analysis of modern warfare, and join us in exploring a possible future. Hour 1. Even before the first missile reaches the Persian Gulf, another battle has already begun, one that no satellite can photograph. In a basement beneath Tehran, the IRGC Cyber Command executes Operation Zulfiqar. Rows of monitors glow as Iranian operators push malicious code into civilian routers, power grids, and military networks tied to U.S. forces in the region. The targets are deliberate: port logistics, Patriot missile batteries, air defense radars, and regional GPS augmentation systems. Within minutes, false data floods the screens of American operators, blinding some early warning systems while forcing others into safe mode. Simultaneously, dozens of Mohajer-10 drones lift off from forward airbases in Shiraz and Bandar Abbas. Each carries precision-guided munitions and a data link designed to resist jamming. Their flight path hugs the Zagros Mountains before slipping out over the Gulf, flying low and slow under radar coverage degraded by Iranian cyber interference. On the coast, Iranian fast attack craft deploy sonar decoys and lay a fresh line of naval mines, an unmistakable signal that Hormuz is becoming a kill zone. In Qatar, at Al Udeid Air Base, maintenance crews rush to secure aircraft as early warning klaxons scream. Commanders discover their communications with regional headquarters flicker on and off, as though someone is severing invisible threads. In Bahrain, a Patriot battery operator sees an error message he's never encountered before. System integrity compromised. Reboot required. This opening strike is designed for shock and paralysis, not annihilation. Iran knows it cannot defeat the U.S. in a prolonged conventional war. Instead, it seeks to buy time, force the U.S. Fifth Fleet to scatter, and challenge America's ability to coordinate its vast network of allies. Hezbollah launches its own salvo of rockets toward northern Israel, while Houthi militias in Yemen fire drones toward shipping lanes, adding chaos across 3 theaters at once. In Washington, President Hayes stares at the encrypted feed as cyber analysts explain the unthinkable. "We've lost segments of command and control, sir. They're inside some of our networks." The first hour of war is not defined by firepower alone, but by the invisible battlefield of ones and zeros. And for now, Iran has seized the initiative. The cyber fog has barely settled when infrared satellites over the Middle East light up again. Dozens of hot signatures streak into the sky from hardened silos near Kerman, Khorramabad, and deep desert launch complexes. These are not short-range harassment weapons. They are Iran's Fateh 110, Zulfiqar, Qiyam-1, and the longer-range Shahab-3 and Imad ballistic missiles, designed to hit U.S. installations and regional partners in a single coordinated strike. In less than 5 minutes, trajectories are confirmed. Al Udeid Air Base, Qatar, Al Dhafra, UAE, Camp Arifjan, Kuwait, and the U.S. Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain are all in the kill box. 25 College Far's anti-ship ballistic missiles roar toward naval staging areas, each carrying a 650-kilogram warhead and terminal seekers designed to home in on moving ships. Iran's prized Qassem Basir hypersonic missile joins the barrage, Mach 5 at terminal phase, skimming low and unpredictable. The first wave slams into Al Udeid's perimeter. Hardened shelters shudder as shockwaves ripple through the desert floor. Several KC-135 refueling tankers erupt into fireballs. In Bahrain, interceptors from the Patriot PAC-3 batteries scream skyward, their software still rebooting from the cyber intrusion minutes earlier. Some missiles are intercepted. Others detonate inside the base, destroying fuel depots and damaging runways. At sea, the destroyer USS Mason deploys its Aegis radar and SM-6 interceptors, splashing several inbound College Far's missiles. But one gets through, impacting a nearby support vessel. Flames shoot skyward as damage control teams scramble to contain flooding and secondary explosions. Iran's goal is clear: cripple logistics and delay America's immediate response. Each missile target is chosen for operational effect: runways, fuel infrastructure, command centers, leaving air wings grounded and communications disrupted. Civilian panic spreads as video footage floods social media. A fireball at Camp Arifjan, smoke plumes over Al Dhafra, and flashes over the Gulf waters. In Tehran, IRGC commanders watch feeds from orbital satellites and local sensors. Cheers erupt as impact confirmations roll in. Phase 1 complete, a brigadier announces. Time to shift to coastal defense posture. Along the Iranian coastline, anti-ship batteries reposition, preparing for American retaliation. Mobile Sejil and Khorramshahr medium-range launchers disperse into mountain tunnels, making counterstrikes more difficult. In Washington, the Pentagon's National Military Command Center resembles a scene from Cold War nightmare scenarios. Red phone lines connect CENTCOM, European Command, and Pacific Command. President Hayes listens as his defense secretary reports, "Minimal casualties so far, sir, but we've lost critical fuel capacity and runway access at 2 bases. Fifth Fleet is repositioning. Expect Iranian follow-up within the hour." The U.S. Air Force launches rapid runway repair teams and diverts surviving aircraft to Oman and Diego Garcia. Strike planners push for immediate retaliation. Tomahawk cruise missiles from submarines already on station in the Arabian Sea and stealth bomber sorties staged from the continental U.S. Yet for the next 2 hours, American power projection is constrained. Iran's missile inventory, estimated at over 3,000 operational ballistic missiles, has been used like a sledgehammer, quick, brutal, and timed to exploit the first hour's cyber paralysis. Even if only 1/3 strike true, the symbolic victory is undeniable. Iran has shown it can challenge U.S. forces head-on, at least for the opening hours. But these strikes come at a cost. Intelligence suggests Iran has already used 20% of its medium and long-range inventory, leaving fewer options for sustained firepower. Still, as Hour 4 closes, the message from Tehran to Washington is clear. We are willing to escalate. Are you? By Hour 5, the Persian Gulf is no longer a transit corridor. It is a battlefield. Thick columns of smoke rise from the Al Udeid fuel depots, and Bahrain's naval pier still burns where a support ship took a direct hit. The U.S. Fifth Fleet, now on high alert, shifts its posture from deterrence to active combat operations. From the Iranian coast, fast attack craft, FACs, of the IRGC Navy surge into the Strait of Hormuz in wolf-pack formations. Each vessel carries anti-ship missiles, rocket pods, and man-portable air defense systems. Supported by Shahid Soleimani-class corvettes and swarms of high-speed drone boats, these craft lay defensive minefields designed to choke shipping lanes and trap U.S. and allied vessels inside the Gulf. Above them, Iranian Khalij Fars and Noor anti-ship cruise missiles launch from mobile coastal batteries, targeting any U.S. or allied vessel that dares to approach. Within minutes, one missile slams into a Liberian-flagged oil tanker, igniting a massive fireball that sends shockwaves through global energy markets. Insurance rates for Gulf shipping skyrocket within hours as traders watch the live feeds. On the American side, the USS Mason, USS Paul Hamilton, and the cruiser USS Shiloh form a defensive arc around the aircraft carrier USS Dwight D. Eisenhower. Aegis radars hum, and SM-2 and SM-6 interceptors streak into the sky, taking down inbound cruise missiles. The carrier launches its first wave of FA-18EF Super Hornets and EA-18G Growlers, tasked with suppressing Iran's coastal defenses and jamming hostile radars. Regional allies react fast, but cautiously. The United Arab Emirates deploys its F-16E Desert Falcons to provide combat air patrol over its northern waters, while Saudi Arabia scrambles Eurofighter Typhoons to guard oil infrastructure. Kuwait authorizes U.S. use of its airspace for bomber ingress, and Oman quietly opens its forward operating sites for emergency refueling. Beyond the Gulf, Iran's proxy network activates. In Yemen, Houthi fighters launch Samad drones and Qassem loitering munitions at commercial shipping, forcing U.S. Navy destroyers in the Red Sea to intercept targets hundreds of miles from the main battle. In Lebanon, Hezbollah fires rockets into northern Israel, stretching Israeli Iron Dome and David's sling batteries. These moves are designed to dilute U.S. and allied focus, forcing them to fight on multiple fronts simultaneously. The first U.S. counterstrike of the war begins in these same hours. Submarines lurking in the Arabian Sea launch Tomahawk cruise missiles toward Iranian coastal radar stations and suspected missile launchers. Explosions rip through hardened shelters near Bandar Abbas and Bushehr, temporarily blinding parts of Iran's coastal command network. Stealth drones provide battle damage assessment, confirming at least 5 key sites are offline. For civilians, this war feels immediate and terrifying. Ships queue outside the Strait of Hormuz, afraid to enter mined waters. Gulf residents crowd supermarkets, emptying shelves. Social media fills with images of burning tankers and air raid sirens, and the phrase number sign "Hormuz closed" begins trending worldwide. Inside Tehran, IRGC naval commanders hail the opening day as a victory. U.S. naval movements disrupted, oil markets spooked, and Iran's coastal defenses intact. But senior advisors to the supreme leader warn of what's coming next. The U.S. will respond with overwhelming power once its forward bases are stabilized. By the end of day one, the Persian Gulf is effectively militarized, regional economies are shaken, and the stage is set for the next phase, America's full-scale counterattack. Iran's opening gambit has bought precious time, but its success is fragile, and every minute that passes brings more U.S. assets into theater. The second day of war begins before dawn, with the roar of jet engines over the Indian Ocean. From Diego Garcia, B-2 Spirit stealth bombers lift into the sky, each armed with 20 GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators, weapons built to pierce hardened bunkers and missile silos. Their destination, Iran's missile launch facilities and command centers buried in the Zagros Mountains. In the Arabian Sea, 2 Ohio-class guided missile submarines SSGNs surface briefly to confirm position before unleashing more than 200 Tomahawk cruise missiles. Their targets: radar sites, surface-to-air missile batteries, and coastal surveillance radars near Bandar Abbas, Jask, and Bushehr. Simultaneously, F-22 Raptors from Al Dhafra Air Base, repaired just enough after Day 1 attacks, launch precision strikes against mobile Sajil and Khorramshahr ballistic missile launchers. The objective is clear: neutralize Iran's long-range strike capability before it can fire a second major salvo. Satellite images confirm multiple secondary explosions as Tomahawks slam into underground entrances and command bunkers. Several launchers escape, disappearing into hardened mountain tunnels, but the coordinated strike destroys at least a dozen known sites. On the ground, U.S. Marines from the 26th Marine Expeditionary Unit conduct a lightning-fast raid on Abu Musa Island, securing a forward operating position to monitor Strait of Hormuz minefields. Engineers immediately begin clearing a lane through Iranian-deployed naval mines, while MH-53E Sea Dragon helicopters sweep for additional threats. Iran's air defenses respond furiously. S-300 PMU-2 batteries around Tehran and Isfahan light up, firing dozens of interceptors. Several Tomahawks are destroyed, but saturation overwhelms the defense net. Iranian state TV broadcasts footage of missile trails and the slogan, "We will resist." Yet inside the IRGC command bunker, frustration mounts as communications falter. Satellite uplinks jammed, fiber optic nodes severed by earlier cyber raids. Regional allies now shift from cautious support to active participation. The UAE and Saudi Arabia launch joint sorties targeting Houthi drone bases in Yemen, cutting proxy attacks by half. Israel quietly increases intelligence sharing, giving U.S. planners updated coordinates of Hezbollah's rocket depots. Kuwait authorizes U.S. tanker aircraft to stage directly from its bases, extending strike ranges. By midday, Iran's strategic picture has changed. Its missile strike capacity is degraded by 30 to 40%, and its coastal radar coverage is riddled with blind spots. The Strait of Hormuz remains contested, but U.S. naval forces begin pressing closer, pushing carrier strike groups toward launch positions for sustained air operations. In Washington, President Hayes addresses the nation. Iran chose war. The United States chooses to end it swiftly. His words signal escalation. The next phase will not be defensive. It will be offensive dominance. By the third day, the battlefield expands beyond missiles and ships. It moves into the financial markets and diplomatic corridors. In Washington, the president signs Executive Order 14,823, freezing all Iranian financial assets under U.S. jurisdiction. Within hours, the Treasury Department announces coordinated sanctions with the European Union, the UK, Japan, South Korea, and Canada, effectively locking Iran out of most of the global banking system. The impact is immediate. Oil exports, Iran's economic lifeline, grind to a halt. Insurance companies refuse to cover tankers leaving Iranian ports, forcing dozens of ships to anchor idle. The Brent crude price spikes by 15%, rattling markets. But allies commit to releasing strategic petroleum reserves to stabilize supply. On the diplomatic front, Secretary of State Alvarez meets with NATO and Gulf Cooperation Council, GCC ministers. Article 5 is not formally invoked, but NATO declares political solidarity, enabling intelligence sharing and logistical access to Mediterranean ports. The GCC states pledge airspace rights and early warning radar data, further tightening the noose around Iran. For Iran's regional proxies, Day 3 is disastrous. Hezbollah, which had fired hundreds of rockets toward northern Israel on Day 1, now faces overwhelming Israeli retaliation. Precision strikes on rocket depots and tunnel networks in southern Lebanon. In Yemen, U.S. and Saudi air campaigns cripple Houthi drone launch facilities, halving their sortie rate. Even Iraqi Shia militias, often loyal to Tehran, begin to splinter under U.S. cyber influence operations, exposing Iranian funding networks. Inside Iran, morale begins to waver. Social media platforms, despite Tehran's censorship efforts, flood with videos of long fuel lines, empty ATMs, and sporadic protests. Meanwhile, the IRGC's own logistics network strains as replacement parts for advanced drones and missile guidance systems run short. By the close of Day 3, Iran's strategic advantage from its surprise opening salvo has evaporated. Its proxies are weakened, its economy under siege, and its access to critical resources dwindling by the hour. For the first time since the war began, Tehran's leadership faces an uncomfortable reality. This is no longer about winning, it's about surviving. By the end of the first week, the war's tempo has shifted decisively. The element of surprise that gave Iran early momentum is gone. The U.S. and its allies now operate with near-complete air and naval superiority. Carrier strike groups, led by the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower and USS Gerald R. Ford, dominate the Arabian Sea, launching round-the-clock sorties deep into Iranian territory. The once menacing fast attack craft swarms in the Strait of Hormuz now hide in coastal inlets, their movements restricted by U.S. aerial surveillance and precision strikes. A comprehensive intelligence assessment delivered to the Pentagon paints a sobering picture for Tehran. 40% of its medium and long-range missile inventory is destroyed, and key radar and command nodes remain offline. The few remaining Khorramshahr and Sejil launchers are dispersed and forced to fire sporadically, making coordinated salvos impossible. Drone attacks persist, but are mostly neutralized by Patriot PAC-3 and Aegis defenses, which are now fully restored following the early cyber disruptions. Inside Iran, the emotional tone shifts from defiance to strain. The first patriotic rallies are replaced by quiet, anxious lines at gas stations and food markets. Economic sanctions bite deeper each day, fuel prices triple, cash withdrawals are restricted, and imported goods vanish. Even IRGC field commanders, once confident, now request emergency supplies and question whether prolonged conflict is sustainable. For Washington and its allies, the week's assessment highlights a key emotional pivot. This war will not be quick, but it will be one-sided if the momentum continues. Yet victory feels complicated. Thousands of Iranian civilians are already displaced from coastal areas, and regional oil infrastructure remains vulnerable to rogue missile or drone attacks. On social media, images of burned-out missile silos and downed drones go viral, contrasting with Tehran's state television broadcasts still claiming operational success. International sympathy for Iran wanes as evidence mounts of deliberate attacks on civilian shipping and proxy-led terrorism beyond its borders. By the end of week 1, Tehran faces an existential choice: negotiate before total economic and military collapse, or escalate to weapons it has never admitted possessing. That thought alone chills analysts in Washington. The nuclear question may soon move from theory to reality. By the second week, the war has reached a dangerous inflection point. Iran's conventional strike capability is effectively crippled. Over half of its known missile launchers are destroyed or trapped in hardened shelters, and its drone production facilities in Isfahan and Mashhad lie in ruins. U.S. carrier groups now patrol freely in the Arabian Sea, while Allied air forces maintain 24/7 combat air patrols over the Gulf. Facing growing losses and an economy collapsing under sanctions, Tehran's inner circle convenes inside a heavily fortified bunker beneath the defense ministry. For the first time, the nuclear option is openly discussed. Iran officially denies possessing nuclear weapons, but Western intelligence has long suspected a latent breakout capability. Analysts inside Washington's National Security Council intercept chatter hinting at the potential transfer of special components to IRGC-controlled missile units. This triggers DEFCON 2, the highest U.S. alert since the Gulf War. B-52 bombers armed with nuclear cruise missiles deploy to Diego Garcia, and Israeli submarines quietly reposition near the Arabian Sea, sending an unmistakable message. Any nuclear escalation will result in regime-ending retaliation. At the same time, back-channel diplomacy accelerates. Oman, Switzerland, and Qatar deliver stark warnings to Tehran. Use of a nuclear device means global isolation and certain destruction. Russia and China, publicly neutral, privately urge restraint, unwilling to risk secondary sanctions or destabilization of global oil markets. Inside Iran, even some IRGC commanders hesitate, warning that nuclear use would erase any remaining international sympathy. The supreme leader listens in silence, his advisors split between nationalist pride and pragmatic survival. By the end of week 2, the war hangs on a knife's edge, not from missiles or drones, but from the possibility of a single irreversible decision. By the third week, the trajectory of the conflict is clear. Iran has lost its ability to project power, and the United States, backed by its allies, holds uncontested control of the skies and seas. The Iranian economy, already fragile before the war, is in free fall under unified global sanctions. Oil exports, its primary lifeline, have collapsed by 90%. Black markets flourish, but basic goods vanish from shelves, sparking protests in Tehran, Shiraz, and Mashhad, despite heavy security crackdowns. On the battlefield, Iran's conventional forces are in retreat. The once feared missile arsenals are depleted or destroyed. The drone swarm tactics that startled analysts in Hour 1 are now countered routinely by integrated air defense networks. Proxy groups like Hezbollah and the Houthis, cut off from direct Iranian support, lose momentum as supply chains are severed. What began as a bold asymmetric strike has become a grinding defense of Iran's own territory. Diplomatically, Iran finds itself isolated. Even sympathetic powers, Russia and China, avoid overt support, unwilling to be drawn into direct confrontation or risk economic retaliation. Regional states that once feared Iran's influence now quietly align closer to Washington, calculating that U.S. alliance power remains decisive. Yet, victory for the U.S. and its allies comes at a cost. Global oil markets remain unstable, maritime shipping routes require months to fully clear of mines, and thousands of lives, military and civilian, are lost. Images of destroyed cities and refugee convoys serve as a stark reminder. Even a short war in the modern era leaves deep scars. Strategically, the war delivers two clear messages. First, Iran's asymmetric tools, missiles, drones, cyber, can inflict early pain, but cannot sustain a campaign against a unified, technologically superior coalition. Second, escalation to nuclear threats invites overwhelming international pressure and risks total national collapse. The hypothetical conflict closes with an uneasy calm, not triumphalism. The United States wins in military terms, but the world is left grappling with the consequences of a war that could have spiraled far beyond control. In modern warfare, there are no real winners, only nations that lose slower, bleed less, or avoid catastrophe altogether.